Exponential taper just means that you cut a similar percentage of the previous dose every time. A linear taper, which is not advised, is cutting the same amount in every cut until the end. It's the easiest way to do it in terms of math. So basically, 100, 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, 0. Something like that. And Mark's hyperbolic taper is based on receptor occupancy of diazepam in monkeys, according to two studies he mentions in his book. And the function looks extremely similar to exponential, except in his method, the tail is faster. Um, and in his book, the tapering tables themselves are nothing like the studies that he mentions, or the way that he created the extrapolated function, and more like a few linear tapers put together, since he just cuts pills without a milligram scale. Instead, by score lines, I assume, that make no sense in the realm of tapering. Dry taper just means you cut the pills or count the beads. It's completely separate from what we just discussed. So that's just the way that you taper in practice. Uh, Basically, cut the pills, shave the pills, or count the beads if it's a capsule, and use a milligram scale, also called a Euler scale, to calculate the doses as precise as possible. Liquid taper is either using water or milk to put the tablets in them, basically, a certain amount of water, then shake it until it dissolves, or wait until it dissolves, and then draw a certain amount of liquid out with a syringe. With the water, this is very dangerous method, as it usually doesn't really dissolve fully in the water. It just creates a suspension of sorts of tiny bits of the drug that quickly falls down after a good shake into the bottom of the vessel you use, like a cup or something. And it's also a waste of the drug, as each time you put a whole pill of pills and then draw more and more each day, rather than just keeping the remains like you would do with dry tapering, and basically have the extra available for you. With doctor, the reason why I think it's dangerous is because doctors do cold turkey people or force a fast taper if they hear you want to come off the drug, in many cases that I've heard. And sometimes there's a shortage of the drug, like now is the case with clonazepam in Australia. People can't actually get it anymore, where there's only one brand basically as well. So you really don't want to throw away any drug and keep it for a rainy day, basically. Now, milk is more forgiving as it has fat in it, and that could potentially create an emulsion. It exists in a in a homogenic way, in the milk, but you can't see the drug in it, of course, because it's milk. So it can cause a lot of stress and anxiety by itself. Not to mention that the study that found out about it, that I actually saw in Mark's book, only talks about diazepam in a very specific form, and not many brands and tablets available for many benzos around the world. Which, in a perfect world, that should be the way that it's working. Okay, lastly, again, completely separate from the other ones, what is a micro taper or a normal taper, basically? That micro taper just means that you change the amount of cut on a daily basis or close to that. It's not really a word, but something that the community invented. And so the definition can also be every 7 days, even, because the normal cut, in a cut and hold, is every 2 to 4 weeks. That's the guidelines, which is basically, that's why they call it cut and hold. So if you have 1 milligram of clonazepam, for example, you cut 10% of that, 0.9. You keep taking the clonazepam at zero point 0.9 for a month, and then you cut another 10% from the zero point 0.9. So it would be 0.81, and so on and so forth, until basically you get to a jump dose, because it gets very slow at the end, and and basically you need to jump at some point. It will never get to zero, so you jump at the equivalent of zero point 0.5 milligrams of diazepam, which is in clonazepam, for example, 0.025, or in Ativan is 0.05. Today, I know that a microtaper on a daily basis is never a good idea, because with long-acting benzos, especially when according to Ashton and almost every other source of authority, you should switch to. Not everyone does, but those are the guidelines. You just don't feel the cuts until it's too late. If you were going too fast, for example, just dropping too fast, like the cuts are too big, or you know, anything like that. Sometimes a week or more, in the case of diazepam, for example, that's when you actually would feel it. And by that time, if you went too fast, you're already have to endure at least a week of potential torturous side effects, even if you hold the taper for that time.